Our third Douglas County Board of County Commissioners business meeting. We want to welcome any of you who are with us at the Douglas County Courthouse, as well as those of you joining us online. I'm just going to pass on a bit of information regarding how we'll run our hybrid meeting in person and on Zoom in this time of social distancing. Each action item will have an opportunity for public comment. If you want to make a comment on that item, we ask that you wait until that item on the agenda. The public comment portion of our agenda is for items not on the agenda, but related to general county business. All public comments should be directed to the County Commission. For both opportunities, we will take public comment from citizens who are in person at the courthouse first, from individuals who are in person at the courthouse first, and then online commenters. All public comments will be limited to 3 minutes. If you have public comment on an agenda item or under regular public comment, please use the raise your hand function on Zoom. Staff will call on you and unmute you. We ask that speakers give their name and address for the minutes. The county reserves the right to shut off the microphone and remove any speaker from the meeting if they are vulgar, rude, or inappropriate. If visual aids are used during the meeting, the presenter will share their screen with the call. Participants will not be able to view them without, will not be able to view them without a computer, smartphone, or tablet. All participants will be entered into the meeting with their audio muted, meaning the commission and the public will not be able to hear you. Presenters will be unmuted when their agenda item comes up. We ask that all online presenters use good conference call etiquette and mute their lines when not speaking and introduce themselves each time they speak. The chat function has been disabled and a recording of this meeting will be available on our website after the meeting. We are going to get started this evening with our consent agenda. I would like to pull item 1.1 from the consent agenda and move it to our regular agenda. Would either commissioner like to pull the other item on the consent agenda? No. Would you like to motion to?
Sure.
Cool.
Commissioner Reed, I move to pull item 1.1 from the consent agenda, move it to the regular agenda, and otherwise approve consent agenda item 1.2.
Second.
All of those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. We will move on to general public comment. Does anyone have public comment for an item not on the agenda this evening? Anyone online?
We don't have anyone online.
Okay, then we will move on to item 1.1, the 2022 market adjustment, merit awards, and personnel policy changes. Sarah, would you like to walk us through this item?
Yes, commissioners, I'd like a chance to appreciate the opportunity to pull this off consent and to go into a little bit more detail about this change. And specifically, this policy and procedure change. And Michelle Spear, our HR director, is here as well. I think I can handle it, but if she has, you all may have questions for Michelle, so I'd be glad to have her answer any of those questions. So this policy change is not related to the 2021 budget. It is related to the 2022 budget and making a clear distinction between policies and procedures relating to the timing in which we give our compensation adjustments. So this has been an issue ongoing with some of our different policies and procedures, where the policy and procedure are really meshed together in the policy statement, and we want a chance to sort of divide them out. We have a recommendation from both HR and payroll to move the giving of our annual market and merit adjustments to March of each year. That's what we did in 2021. And they would like us to move those to March. The longevity payments would stay based off your October date and be given in November. So what we've done in this policy adjustment is just simply to clearly state that the procedure as to when we give market adjustments will be moved to procedure and be taken out of the policy. But we will continue to the rest of it stays the same. And the policy really is the amount of funds the commissioner set aside in terms of the budget process and the types of pay that we give. That is a policy decision and that remains in the policy. And that's really been our past practice, has been to adjust, the amount that we give in each budget process. And commissioners have done that throughout the years at different points in time, have adjusted those things each budget cycle. And so this just makes a clearer distinction between what is process and what is procedure. And then allows us as the administration to adjust the procedural issues in terms of timing, what payroll, when things are due, all of that remains a procedural issue that would be set by administration. Is there specific questions about that? Or I'd be glad to talk a little bit more about longevity in 2021 if the commissioners have some questions about that as well.
I just want to say I appreciate the distinction between policy and procedure, and I think it's really important that we move forward with cleaning that up. I do think it'd be a good thing for you to take some time to talk about longevity pay.
So I'd be glad to kind of talk a little bit about compensation increases in the 2021 budget. So I want to kind of walk everyone back through all the decisions that have been involved in this process and really just talk about when those conversations were had publicly and when we had those conversations. So in April of 2020, it seems like a lifetime ago, we were in the process of beginning to build the 2021 budget. And at that point in time, we really had no indication as to how the pandemic was going to be impacting Douglas County assessed valuation, so our revenue growth. We really had no indication at that point. At that point in time, the recommendation was to include no compensation increases in the 2021 budget. And then we said we would revisit that in 2021 if revenues rebounded to the point where we could make that consideration. In March of this year, 2021, we brought back before this commission, which is a different commission that made that decision in terms of that budget, setting that 2021 budget. We brought back to this commission conversations about compensation increases. My main concern as developing those increases was how do we prepare for the 2022 budget? So, because we're constantly on a cycle where we're in a year and we're working on the budget the next year. At that point in time, I still really did not have a clear indication as to what the revenues would be in 2022, but we wanted to make that commitment to employees to increase base pay, which is what our market and merit adjustments do. They increase base pay. And we wanted to get that in and get that done early in 2021 so that we could make sure our 2022 budget was built appropriately. So our main focus at that point in time and that agenda was in March, we took to the commission and the action that was recommended was for market and merit adjustments at that time. We did not recommend moving forward with longevity in 2021 at that time because I was not clear as to where revenues would be in 2021 to be able to build the 2022 budget. So I know that's confusing, but I think that's important to sort of make that distinction of we wanted to build in base pay increases as we could, so we could prepare for 2022. And that was our priority at that time. Then we went through the 2022 budget process. As commissioners know, we had an assessed valuation growth of 2.7%. That is a full almost 1.5% below what Douglas County has historically received. So the development of that budget was extremely tight in terms of revenues. But we were able to include increases for 2022, both merit, market, and longevity. So I think it's important to state that longevity is built back in for 2022. It was, and so along with market and along with merit. Now with this policy change, if that's approved, the market merit adjustments will move to March and April, and then longevity will stay in November as it has done historically. I think it's we talked to department heads at that time about that decision. We shared it with employees back when we built the 2021 budget, but I understand that that was a long time ago and people have been really busy and life has moved on since then. And so they may not have been paying as close attention to what was happening with longevity in 2021. I'd be glad to answer any commissioner questions about that or those decisions and anything about what those funds are and so forth.
I don't have any questions, sir. I just want to, you answered all my questions. So my appreciation for you taking us through that.
I do appreciate all of the background. I also really appreciate our focus during the 2022 budget cycle of focusing on that base pay around the merit and market pieces, because I think that one of the things that I see as from the outside is that it's really base that we want to get moved up. as we think about longevity, which is a one-time payment, we want to make sure that our base is competitive. I recognize both of these are built back into 2022 budget, but it is that base pay that I'm really concerned about. But we will open this up for public comment. Do we have anyone here in the courthouse for public comment on this item?
Just want to go over to the microphone and you can turn it on. You need on the microphone. There you go.
Hi, my name is Nolan Packard.
Nolan, you
Um,
need to speak really close to that microphone. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Nolan Packard. I currently work for Public Works. It was announced that the department heads were discussed with this matter and told about it, and the employees. I'd like, if so, our department head had not discussed that with his employees. And if the other employees were notified, how were they notified? Because we apparently missed that. So, on the longevity, so that's my only concern, was notification. So, thank you.
Does not appear so.
Sarah, I know it may be speculation, but do we have any additional information about how employees might have been notified? I recognize this was a while ago because this was during the discussions about the 2021 budget, which would have been in 2020 during the height of the pandemic. But do we have any additional information to share?
I can, no, and I'd have to go back and find the emails that maybe were sent from HR and I can try to find that for you. We did, share it. I know there were emails that went out, but I'll need to go back and look and make sure that you guys were notified. And I do acknowledge it was probably a while back. And so, and our conversations in March, when we talked about market merit, I know it was a part of that conversation with department heads and we were probably so focused on trying to make sure we got market merit done on time, sort of at the last minute, that we missed this communication. And for that, I'm sorry if employees weren't fully aware of what's going on. And I really don't want to, this was really about a reflection of our concerns about just having enough revenues to establish the 2022 budget. And I hope employees are aware that in addition to all of those compensation adjustments being included back in the 2022 budget, we're also undergoing a compensation analysis that was funded in the 2022 budget to evaluate whether or not our positions here in Douglas County are market competitive. I have a pretty strong feeling that they are not. And so we fully anticipate that there will be additional adjustments needed to help move us to that market pay. And that will be another conversation for the commission and employees to really weigh in on how we do compensation adjustments, what is market-based, what is merit, and what is longevity. And we can have a more full conversation about how do we want to make sure our compensation is competitive moving forward. So I really look forward to having those conversations both with employees and with the commission once we get the results of that study, which I hope will get done this calendar year. But it might be, or actually it's probably going to be next January or February. But we'll try to do a better job making sure we get that communication out effectively.
Any additional discussion from commissioners?
First, I want to recognize for those employees who lost that longevity, that is a loss. And I think it's important for us to appreciate their service and their work that they did. Being the person on that 2021 budget, one of the people on that 2021 budget, that was hard not to include market merit and longevity. And then looking at our 2022 budget, knowing how tight it was, I understand how our employees are feeling like they've lost something here. And I just want to recognize that. And then also recognize that that was a really difficult time for this community. It was really hard. It was really scary. We didn't know where we would be economically. I'm really pleased we were able to get market and merit back, and recognize the hard work that those employees have done. And especially during a time when we called on our basic services all across our community. So really appreciative of our county employees, really pleased we could bring it back. Wish we could have brought back the longevity as well. And I thank Sarah for clarifying all that, because I'm sure, going back through all that and trying to figure out what all happened during a very turbulent time was difficult. And then the last thing I'd just like to say is thank those employees who spoke up. I understand what it's like to speak up on these things when you're an employee in an organization and your bosses are here and administration is here, and I get all that and the authority that's there. So thank you for speaking up. Thank you for sending those emails that you did. Appreciate that.
This is Commissioner Reed. Thanks, Commissioner Kelly, for that. I want to echo all of those sentiments, especially appreciate folks speaking up and reaching out and raising questions. And in this particular instance, it was an opportunity for me to make sure that I had a good grasp on that timeline, especially being a new commissioner this year and making sure to be clear about where we were and how we got here, and to clarify that communication around that is an important thing for us to be mindful of. So I do appreciate folks raising questions and concerns, and want for staff to continue to do that so that we can make sure that we are getting better at communication. So thank you for that. I'm happy to make a motion to approve this if there's no further discussion. Commissioner Kelly, did you have something more?
Nope.
Okay. Commissioner Reed, I move to approve today's consent agenda item 1.1, the 2022 market adjustment and merit awards and personnel policy changes.
Second.
All of those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we will move on to regular agenda item 3.1, establish a review process for misdemeanor institutional defense proposals. Sarah.
Thank you, commissioners. On October 1st, staff received a proposal from a group of local attorneys under the title Douglas County Defense Services for institutional defense of misdemeanor indigent cases. In addition to that, the commissioners received a proposal for those services from Kansas Holistic Defense that was included in the development of the 2022 budget. During the intermeeting time period between the budget process and October 1st, the commission formed a work group to study indigent services issues. That work group is wrapping up, and their final report will be on your agenda next week. But in the meantime, we have these two proposals in front of us. I really want to stress that in the conversation as to how we proceed here, my hope for today is that we really talk about process. And what kind of things does the commission want to see in terms of the evaluation of proposals? And what is the appropriate process to use moving forward to make decisions and determinations? And then set a date to have that actual review. As outlined in your agenda item, as staff, I have an obligation to present you with a recommendation. But obviously, like with everything I recommend to you, this is really up to you in terms of how we establish this review process and if there are any changes to that. So my recommendation would be is that we talk today about what we want to see in that review, if there's additional information or if we want presentations or how we want to structure it. I will be in communication with both organizations that have submitted their proposals, and then I would recommend that we have a review of those on November 17th. Like I mentioned, you will get the work group report next week, and you'll have that piece of information. You will have had time to review and digest that, and then we have that review on the 17th. There's no obligation for the commission to necessarily make a decision that day, but I just think it would be good to get it on the schedule for both groups to come in and to have a chance to answer any questions that you might have about what was submitted, or ask for additional information if that's what's needed. So at this point, I really just turn it over to the commission to discuss what kind of process we want to use moving forward.
Thank you, Sarah. This is Commissioner Portillo. I do just want to say I really appreciate the work of staff on this one. And I think just from a timeline perspective, it is important to make sure that we walk through that Kansas Holistic Defenders presented their proposal as part of our community partner funding in the spring. we established the Indigent Defense Work Group in March so that we could start having discussions about indigent defense in our community, both misdemeanors and felonies. The entire time that we had that work group, Kansas Holistic Defenders as an organization, Allison Natali as their director was a part of that work group. There was transparency that we had a proposal in front of us. Shay Downing was originally on that work group and stepped away from that work group. Blake Glover joined that work group. At no point did Shay or Blake mention that they were part of a group putting together another proposal. Even after this proposal was submitted on October 1st, we had a meeting on October 16th, and Mr. Glover did not mention until it was asked of him whether he was a part of putting a proposal together. So I am very concerned, and I just want to voice my concern around the ethics of transparency in being a part of that work group as we move forward with considering these proposals. I do think it's important for us as a commission to make sure that we're talking through these proposals and a way that we can evaluate them both. I think there's also kind of that competing nature of, we had a proposal that is presented as part of our community partnerships, which nonprofits go through, and then a for-profit proposal from an LLC that I don't think is actually established in the state, but a for-profit company that put together a competing proposal. So we have two different types of organizations competing to do the same type of work within our community. So I really appreciate the recommendation that staff put forward. And I think that having the conversation about this on our November 17th meeting, after we've had a chance to talk about that indigent defense report on the 10th, makes a lot of sense. This summer, when we were discussing budget proposals, we didn't have any organizations kind of present at us. We read the proposals and then asked questions of organizations. And I would propose that we do a similar thing in this case. We have both proposals and we would be able to ask questions of both entities. But I welcome comments from my fellow commissioners.
This is Commissioner Reed. Commissioner Portillo, I appreciate you bringing up those concerns. Have some similar concerns about the process and transparency of the two different groups that have submitted proposals. And in particular, I think for me, that translates to being interested in hearing or receiving a bit of a summary from both organizations about that summarizes the community partners and stakeholders that they have been engaging with in preparation of the proposal to the county. And so I would be interested to know more about who was engaged in those processes. And I just want to be candid and say that I was surprised to see an additional proposal come in so late in the year after having had more than 6 months of very public conversation and evolution of the conversation, including in our budget process. So I do want to voice that concern and ask for some feedback from both groups, or I guess I'll just call it sort of an executive summary of which community partners and stakeholders were engaged in the process of thinking about and formulating the proposals that were presented to us.
This is Commissioner Portillo. So Commissioner Reed, I just want to make sure I'm understanding the ask. So you would be putting an ask out to both organizations to maybe send us another one-page overview before that meeting on the 17th, so that we
Yes.
could review that and then ask questions at that meeting.
Yes, yes, and I would agree also with your assertion that to be in line with the budget process, that we have the proposals, we are able to review those with ample time and provide and come up with questions that we have, and we use that opportunity on the 17th to ask questions rather than receive presentations.
Appreciate all the comments. I would say I really want to see that report from the work group. You know, I hope we have a clear definition for us, and that may be some discussion that we do after receiving the report of what outcomes we're looking for, what specific things we want to see. For me, and I'd ask the commissioners if they're supportive of this, I really want to see a dollar breakdown of what this is. You know, in one of the proposals that I read, there was a fee, and then there was commitments for the county to make other dollar commitments outside of our budget, which is really tricky to do in the way that we do our budget. And so, you know, for me, and this is something that I don't need on the, that won't come out of the report from the work group, is, you know, a very detailed, and that's in our typical budget packets, you know, of how these dollars are going to be spent, what they're going to be spent on, who the dollars are going to. There's significant difference in these two proposals on cost. And this is a significant cost to the county, what we're asking to do. And so I just want to be really thoughtful about that, and that, you know, how we're spending these dollars aligns with our priorities. So that was big. Those are big things for me, and something I'd like to see along with that executive summary, sort of a financial breakdown spreadsheet, if you will, whatever that might be.
This is Commissioner Portillo. I really appreciate that comment, Commissioner Kelly. And I wonder, this is coming from my academic background, but for a number of grants that we propose, we always have a budget narrative, which is very similar to what we have in our summer budget process and what we saw as part of KHD's proposal. But I wonder if we could ask each of these organizations to provide us with a budget narrative overview of exactly where the dollars are going, and then an overall dollar amount, because I also saw what you did, that there was an ask, and then there were additional asks outside of the overall ask in one proposal. So an executive summary around stakeholders and community partnerships, and then a budget narrative overview from each organization would be helpful.
I think those are great suggestions. I think I could just, one way to might simplify this is just forward our budget narrative documents to Douglas County Defender Services and ask them to complete them. And then allow Kansas Holistic Defenders to provide any additional information based off of this feedback that they would also like to submit. And how we generally do budget proposals, as the commissioners are aware, is that you fill out those questions, you answer the spreadsheet narrative, and if you want to attach any additional information, you're certainly welcome to do so. So that way it would help to allow commissioners to compare a little closer to apples in that kind of document. Would that be helpful? Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
I think that sounds great.
Okay, great.
If I can ask a question, so Sarah, in one of the proposals, it actually had the contract, it actually had a drafted contract. Do we have that from Kansas Holistic Defender, something similar to that?
So generally what we do through the community partner budget process is the county has a standard contract for service and a community partner agreement. And then we ask the agency to prepare a scope of services that matches up to what we heard in the budget, staff heard in the budget process, and then we agree to a scope of services. So my expectation, if we follow past practice, would be the county would prepare that contract. It would be consistent with our similar types of, when payments are made, how payments are made, liability, indemnification issues set forward by our attorneys. And then the discussion really comes down to a scope of services. I have a draft of some scope of services based off of conversations as they were heading down in terms of Kansas Holistic Services, but I don't have anything I feel confident necessarily sharing at this point. And honestly, that agreement is normally prepared by admin once the commissioners set that budget. So I don't really have a comparison to that contract that I feel comfortable sharing at this point.
And I would want us to be very careful about the scope, the roles here,
Yes.
that we as a commission approve the budget, but it is up to our administrators to put the contract together. But it is our administrators who put the contract together. We do not have contracts from outside agencies.
Agree. Yeah. And I would also say that in this process too, I'm going to want that contract or that scope of services specifically to be reviewed by district court and the court's administrator and chief judge in terms of that process. There'll be probably some specifics that they would like to have included in that as well. So And we work collaboratively like that with our department agencies and friends for different types of services. And that's a pretty normal process for us.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, I'm pleased to hear that because I can think of some other instances where we've worked with community partners that maybe we didn't have this conversation is really good. We didn't have a process, and it would be interesting if another group came in and said, well, I didn't know, and I don't want to pick out one of our community partners. I didn't know they did that for that much. We could probably do that for that much. And so what we're talking about is just clearing up processes for people that I'm interested to see if others will take advantage of in the future. And they may not, but I think it's good for us to do this work.
I completely agree. It's good to have clear process. I also will just reiterate that our budget processes are always public. And so the public discussion, and I think that our staff have always been very open to answering questions, and any constituent can reach out to any of us as commissioners without having to core request our emails. They can get in touch and have conversations.
I appreciate the commissioners recognizing the community partner agreement process, and Jill here has been seeing the evolution of how we have treated these community partner agreements over the last several years here at Douglas County. And I know it sounds really nerdy, but we're really proud of the advancements that we have made here to really outline specific, accountable scopes of services that we ask for our community partners to achieve, and how we set up those reporting mechanisms and what we anticipate from them. One of those biggest ones for us is Burt Nash Community Mental Health Center. The development of that scope of services is an elaborate process. We meet quarterly to get data from them, to evaluate programs. And we've done that with several other folks. So it takes a lot of our staff time to make sure that those are done effectively. And it's an important part of having that consistent approach across our community partners.
And I appreciate that a big part of that is also the accountability and the data piece. And that has been, as my fellow commissioners will see, a big part of our conversations around the Indigent Defense Work Group. What types of data do we need, and how do we then use those conversations to talk about the specific outcomes? So I'm excited for that conversation next week.
I do feel, since we mentioned the report, since that will be on the November 10th agenda, we're in the process of setting that agenda now. So if folks are interested in seeing that report, it's going to be available online for that November 10th agenda, and you should be able to access it here pretty quickly.
If there are not additional questions from commissioners, we will open this item up to public comment. Do we have anyone in the courthouse for public comment on this item? Do we have anyone online for public comment on this item? Sarah, do you need a motion from us around process, or was the conversation enough to move forward?
No, I believe staff has what it needs for consensus to move forward for the review on the 17th.
Great, thank you. We will move on to item 3.2, business associate and contractor user agreements with Jayhawk Area Agency on Aging.
So we've had a little bit of that got added to the agenda like 2 minutes ago. So we're gonna move it. It's been moved to the 10th. So
I was wondering where that came from, because I hadn't seen it in advance. So
just got,
thank you.
Trying to do the agenda early has gotten us a little discombobulated.
No worries. We will move on to appointments.
Do we need to make a motion to defer that item?
Since it was never really noticed,
Okay.
I'm going to consider it was never really on your
Okay.
agenda. So, because it wasn't put out 24 hours in
Yeah,
advance.
I think that makes sense, because it wasn't on the agenda that went out. It's just,
Yeah.
I hit refresh. But I don't believe we have any appointments. Do we have any
I don't
appointments?
think we have any at this time.
Okay, we will move on to miscellaneous. What do you have for us, Sarah?
Commissioners, you have a memo from me in the packet. I want to note that there is a paragraph. I had Bob Tryansky put together a little bit of wording related to some funding reallocations between the Heartland Raid Act team and our integrated crisis team at the hospital. It is under my dollar authority to approve, but I just want commissioners to know how we're using those funds to be ready for some additional work. So if you have questions on that when you read it, let me know. And I'd also add that we did add a work session for next week's agenda, and for a presentation on a restorative justice initiative with the district attorney's office and a local group called Building Peace. So that will be at our 4 o'clock meeting next week. And that's all I have, commissioners.
Do we have miscellaneous items from either commissioner?
I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the day after the election, an election with a whole lot of races, and some pretty close races, too. So I just want to acknowledge our election staff and what a monumental undertaking that always is, and in a new office this year. And I've heard really great feedback in the community about folks who went and voted there. Seemed like it was a great gathering place for candidates and supporters last night. So, and appreciate all the poll workers that were out there for 12. I know some folks who worked full 12-hour shifts at some of their polls, and I just always have a deep amount of respect and appreciation for those volunteers in our community.
Jamie Shu and the 300 volunteers, absolute rock stars. All right, we are adjourned. Thank you.